Good morning. It's 4 o'clock in Great Britain and 11 o'clock New York and 8 o'clock in California. Bless your hearts if you live in California. The purpose of these podcasts is to make an appeal to rally the single mom, the gal who has children, and no matter how much money she makes, it just isn't going to work out. It's not going to work out. And so the idea is to rally those gals and ask you to speak up and come across with how much money you need for a budget to run a household. It goes back to home economics, is which this is all about. Just so it said, we have about 3 dozen, a half dozen minute anecdotes on 2 YouTube channels there. And so we're going to ramble in the good sense of the word and try and get you to chime in. And home economics is where the married couple is viewed as the base economic unit. It's the smallest economic thing. Go up to the computer you're listening to and pretend to pull out a transistor. Then pull out a second transistor, and as you pull out the third transistor, it's no longer a computer. You put that transistor back in, it's back to being a computer, and there you go. That's the family unit. 10-year-olds can't pay for the mommies can't take care of the kids and get out in the workplace. And so the husband and wife go together and they're viewed as a single unit. I have to watch that. The definition of work is more than one meaning. If you're a housewife, you choose to take on a housewife as a profession. You're first a Yank, a normal, well-adjusted person, a race relegated to an endearing quality of your parents, and then you will the good of another person, and you do it because Christ rose on the third day. And it's those three things in a shop manual fashion that make up God and country. Then you become a good wife to a husband and a good husband to a wife. If you get married, you choose that profession, and you become a good mother and a good father, and it turns into home economics. You take it from there. Picture a detached American house from the post-World War II era. Picture a young couple inside. Go off to the side and start with farming and mining. Then above that, manufacturing. And above that, wholesale, retail, and repair. And above that, retirement, education, and recreation. And the doctors and lawyers become a kind of lattice that holds it all together. And it's a God and country thing. It's a Catholic priest that causes all this to come into being to begin with, home economics. And so that's what was thrown out in the 1970s in the United States. That was the early 70s was the watershed time when everything changed, went from home economics to individual rights. And they reached the crossroads in the road, and they had a choice back then. They had a choice either to become the upper class in a peasant and property class society. It's called the consumption society, and forcing you to have to work more and more hours, or they could have gotten onto a maintenance level, and they could have made money by making other people better off. And that's that second part. That's how you get a large middle class. That's how you get a huge middle class. As a matter of fact, the definition of a middle class in the United States was completely different from the other definitions. Here it was genuinely meant. This house you see behind me is a house I grew up in, and our dad was a repairman. And this house was built right around 1950. And with that repairman's salary, he could afford a 3-bedroom brick house on a half-acre lot. A couple doors down was a milkman, if you remember who they were. And there was a plumber and a guy who worked at a feed store up the street. And they could all afford the family budget. That is, things were arranged so that the money they made was enough to support a wife and 2.2 children. And from the wife's point of view, she had a budget to run the household, and she ran it similar as if it was a business, in a way of saying it. In the 1970s, that was all thrown out. They had a chance to cash in on it all, and they did. And they caused people to have to work more hours. It went something like this. There's a household income, and hubby made enough money to pay the gas bill. And the gal went out in the workplace, and when gals first started in the workplace, the bum's rush is that they actually weren't in the workplace, the consumption society. In other words, their income wasn't used to pay the gas or electric bill. It was extra income. And with that extra income and their attitude changing, they have no sense of love and no sense of guilt in them. They went out and bought, instead of a house, they bought a duplex. And they stuffed as many people as they could in that duplex. And they got those people to pay their rent. And right there was the thin edge of a wedge, where people who could barely afford a house now have to rent. And they become the peasant class. Over time, it gets worse. The hubby has to start working more and more hours just to pay the gas bill, and then the hubby and the wife have to start working, and now they've institutionalized teenagers in the workplace. And it just goes on from there. And that's you. You're growing up into this, and you just hear story after story. I only take home $2,000. I pay $1,600 a month rent. I can't afford food, no less $700 or $800 for a daycare for my child to watch somebody else raise my child. And they're past the point of tears. If that's you, we need you to speak up. We have anecdotes on the YouTube channel, and we have a method that is, we know what's wrong, what to do about it, and how do you do it. And this part of it is to get you to go back to being the home economist. You have a child, or perhaps you have two teenage children. How do you get them to a dentist? How do you get clothes on their feet? How do you stay up or come home and stay up all night? And if you have a toddler, they don't even recognize you. You spend so little time with them, and the time you spend with them, they're sleeping, and you're trying to feed them. This is ridiculous. This is the end result of what happened in the 70s, when they said they would push us into a consumption society, and a few decades later, it will all come crashing down. But from the point of view of a guy, the question to ask is, how many hours a week do you have to work? If you're running a forklift in a warehouse, how many hours a week do you have to come up with rent and food and groceries? And you don't even come close to making enough money to come up with a household budget. And so the idea is, if you for these particular podcasts, is if you know anybody who's a single mom and you're in those shoes, which is I think over half the population are being raised by single moms, to get you to speak up and come across with a budget. Just so I said, in home economics, you're not supposed to rent property, you own it. And you don't rent property to other people, you don't rent property from other people. And if you go back to the 70s, you realize all those people were scrambling to get into property to rent out to other people. And if you take a second look, you'll realize that these were the people who claimed to have a social conscience. They were the sophisticated intellectuals. You'll also hear other phrases such as, we have to get away with it because we can get away with it. And you look back and it's just nightmarish. And so if you listening to this and you know anybody, get them to speak up. There's a live chat, and just start typing in, this is how much money I make, these are my bills. And from the point of view of a guy, this is how much money I take home, and this is how much money I would need, how many hours I would have to work in order to come across with the budget the gal's saying. I'm not quite sure in California, but in Phoenix anyway, you have to have an income of about 175,000 plus a year in order to afford to get into a house. And it's very much worse in California and other cities. You can just see it in the 1970s, I keep making reference to, when society changed. You could very easily afford to get into a house. the highest standard of living in the United States, as far as the working guy, the for real guy, was 1973. And it's just like the letter V on its side, the lazy V. Housing prices went up as much as $2,000 a month. And that just pushed you into a class of peasantry. Now we're like all the other countries. We have a peasant and property class society. Those guys who got into gold and real estate in the 70s, they're very much well off. They also had to have an attitude. They were scoundrels. They had no sense of love in them and no sense of guilt in them. And so that brings up the idea of parameters of competition. If you arrange the parameters of competition so that there'll be a large middle class, there'll be a large middle class. If you arrange the parameters of competition so that you breed a breed of normal, well-adjusted people, you'll breed a breed of normal, well-adjusted people. And they threw all that out in favor of the intellectual. Just so it said, we get to comment on things here. So we're hoping if you're in California and you're involved in those fires, bless your heart, you try and look to see if there's any silver lining in it all. And in our world, we'll get you to go and take the people that got in all the real estate investing and get them out of there, and take the people who cashed in on it all, Harry the hippie, Al the Afro, and Donna the feminist, and get them out of there. And what's left is you, the Yank. And to daydream a bit, if you're there and you're listening, put yourself into the shoes as if you were in charge of the city planning department. And you can see on television a block of just houses that have been leveled. And daydream a bit. You're now the professional citizen. You're now, and you're viewing things in terms of home economics. The stereotypical post-World War II mom and dad. And now things start to look better. You have a chance to build a world straight out of a Hollywood set and make everything look beautiful, the envy of the world. You picture, I did a bit of daydreaming, and I pictured that I saw that leveled neighborhood, and you can picture a house being built up there, an Eichler house, for example, if you know what they are. And you can see the gal, that's you, just getting the house designed so that it's comfortable. There's a living room that's big enough to house everybody, and a dining room, and a kitchen to support the dining room, and that sort of thing. And if I got the stories right, there's a bedroom about 10 by 12 for two brothers or sisters, and a place in the garage that's just for the husbands, and a place somewhere in the house that's just for the gal, the wife. And you build a house that gets everybody out of poverty and into plenty. And you could see, I can just sit there and daydream, and I can see you guys just building a brand new world right out of the movies, and where kids are quite safe and comfortable and have shoes on their feet. It all works out. The phrase for that is called home economics. You're going to hate me right about now, but it's a God and country thing. In the end, it's a Catholic thing. The Catholics hold the moral high ground, and all this stuff comes out of the Catholic Church. You put a star up in the sky, and there's a perfect person up there, and you're never going to come close to being anything like him. But like a professional baseball player, you bat 300, you're doing great. And then you head out, the grand deduction, you head out into society. Daydream a bit and picture yourselves going to the Supreme Court. And I'm sure the people in the Supreme Court won't mind stepping down and going and picking up the slums that they caused. And you replace them with the Apostles' Creed, and you replace the judges with Catholic judges. And then you walk down the steps, and that's the grand deduction. You apply everything. And if it has to do with God, it's called the grand deduction. And society is made up of our citizenry. You go through a kind of boot camp and you choose to be normal and well adjusted. That's not a natural thing. To be normal is not a natural thing. To will the good of another person is not a natural thing. It involves an outside imposed thing. And you're a good citizen. And then a society is made up of the summation of household units. And you can start talking about how many farms we need, how many mines we need. If you're up for it, picture a detached house and there's a young couple in it. And they're choosing between buying a couch or maybe two recliner chairs. And you can just see, as long as the same people that are doing the producing, doing the consuming, you can just see all the farming for the materials and the mining and the manufacturing, building, say, recliner chairs or rather than couches and that sort of thing. And then you can just see all the stores and the advertising, all geared towards getting that young couple what they want. And that's home economics. That's the stuff that works. And it works absolutely terrific for everybody except people who are malicious, the people who have no sense of love in them and no sense of guilt in them, who want to move up in the foothills and become the consumers. And all of us live in the valley and do the producing. You think of American slavery with people living in the big house and the proletariat living in the slave quarters, and there you go. You can call it slavery. You can call it communism. Communism is just flat out evil. Find a Baltimore Catechism. I sit down and write out the literal opposite of it, and you have communist doctrine. It's intended to be that way. And communism and fascism are just the same thing. Whether they're called the class of intelligentsia or the slum lords, they're the same group, and that's just the way it is. We'll come over here and we'll be the Catholic in the pews, the American Yank, with George Washington over there and flying the flag on the holidays and being a professional person. That professional person, that gal is that common housewife. She's the one that's worth her weight in gold. She's the one that you place so much importance in. She comes into being. The Catholic nun exists when the Catholic nun exists. And so we've been on for a short 20 minutes now, and we're publicizing the idea of trying to get the gals and guys to chime in and start putting numbers to this. We just had our house built down. I don't have anything. If I'm going to get a house, this is the budget I need. This is how much money I have for mortgage, not a rent. And this is how much money I need to buy food and groceries and get everybody out of poverty. And by the way, if you're going to do all the consuming, you do the if you're going to do all the producing, you do the consuming. You're the one that gets to play in that silly tennis tournament they have every year. It's a professional citizenry and the professional housewife playing in an amateur tennis tournament. And it's the way it's supposed to be. I think they screwed that up, but not you. So if you're listening to this, or if you hear this, go out and pass the word. Get some gals to start chiming in and say whether you live, how much money you make, and this is see if you can't go around, stick your head in a house that's appropriate, what I would call a mid-century modern house, and find out how much of the budget you would need, and then call in and start letting us know, and we'll pass the word and we can do something about it. We know exactly what's wrong. They had a revolution that culminated in the 70s, and they threw out home economics in favor of individual rights. And we know exactly what to do about it and how to do it. You go back to home economics, you get the courts to go back to God and country, the grand deduction, Catholic, holding the other absolute. And then you have the grand deduction, and we're all citizens now. And you have our citizenry, the summation of family units, things become very clear and easy. Work fine lasts a long time. Well, so we'll get you to pass the word as best we can, and will be, hopefully, we change our hours. We'll be um, on the air on a podcast tomorrow at 7 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. in Great Britain, and 2 o'clock in New York, and 11 o'clock in California. And hopefully we had to change our hours. Hopefully we would be on Saturday, Sunday, and Monday, and get you to go to work. We'll put you to work, and then we'll try and get you everything you need. Good luck. Thank you.